Welcome to our posts. Today, we will see stories of r/petty revenge. You want to try to take 9 inches of our property. We will take 20 of yours. We have lived in our house for about 8 years in a rural neighborhood in Arizona. About a year ago, this dude from California bought the lot next to us and threw a fit about the stuff we had on the property line. We had put a single fence pole vaguely where the property line was. We hadn't had any sort of land survey done. It was supposed to just be a temporary marker that became a permanent marker. Dude was absolutely livid that we had vehicles parked on his property. The very tip of one of our cars was touching the established boundary. He threatened to have our vehicle towed. So we simply had an actual land survey done, and it turned out the property line was a good 20 into his property. Homeboy should have just let sleeping dogs lie and not been in butthole about a few inches. Edit. I had some journalists reach out to me and ask for some more comments, so here are the updates you asked for. Feel free to ask more questions for more clarifications or ask again if I missed yours. Hello, thank you for reaching out. Zip code redacted for GPS reference. It's a small, rural neighborhood in the mountains of Arizona. All the houses are 3 5-acre horse properties. The roads are all dirt and unmaintained. It used to be a very understandable place to live, but in the last few years it has been developed and property values have been going up, quadrupling since we moved here in 2016. This has attracted a crowd of people who care what yards look like who simply weren't here when this was cheap. The neighbor is one of these new people. We moved here specifically because the neighborhood had a bunch of messy yards already, and we wanted to also have lenient neighbors. We lived in harmony with our neighbor's junky yards for years. The neighbor introduced himself by calling the county on a bunch of us anonymously. We knew he called on us because he was bragging about calling the county on several other of the neighbors for their messy yard, so whether he intentionally included us in the report or not, he brought the inspectors to the neighborhood. He came on our property by at least 40 before there was a fence to closely examine our piles of scrap metal. We caught this on camera and confronted him in text. It turned out he was very angry that he had purchased land next to a pseudo scrapyard. We had several cars in various stages of disassembly and piles of materials. Keep in mind, this is the country. This is normal out here. We're on 5-acre lots. Another detail that I missed in my original post. He isn't even living on this lot. He bought a lot with a very small cabin 3 houses down along with the lot next to us with the intention of turning it into an income property. After we confronted him in text, he confronted us in person in our front yard, leaning against our "No Trespassing" sign and screaming obscenities at us. 3. We haven't seen him. Since we saw him on our security camera observing the survey markers, dismayed. It's entirely possible that we entirely chased him out of the neighborhood. The people on the other side of his lot, who have an equally trashed yard from their small-scale pig farming operation, that he should have known existed before buying the land, had such a bad experience with him that she had a restraining order on him. They are also having a potentially equally funny dispute about a shed that she built fully on his lot over 15 years ago, which means they're going to have to go to court over who now owns it, and our adverse possession laws are certainly on her side. Currently, we are building an ugly fence on the newly surveyed property line. Next story. Try to force me to take in my deadbeat brother? Enjoy wasting your 3-day weekend. My older brother Ted 42M has been living with my parents for the last 6 years or so. Refuses to get a full-time job, refuses to help around the house, drunk half the time, known to sell a little weed and Xanax out of his bedroom window, super disrespectful to my mom and blames her for everything. He has at least 2 kids by 2 different women he hasn't seen in years. Last year I bought my first house, and since day one my parents and brother have been harassing me to let him move in with me. They say I have so much space and that they've already done enough for Ted and it was my turn now. Basically a constant nagging since 2023. This weekend I finally got sick of it and decided to send a message. I got a call last Tuesday with my parents demanding once again that I take in my brother and that my dad had a 3-day weekend coming up so he had time to help him move. I said okay, fine, I'll do it, and gave them a list on conditions that Ted would have to follow to live here. Of course they promised he'd do everything I said crap, and we scheduled it for Friday. So Friday comes and they show up with 2 cars full of stuff, but guess what? I wasn't home. I take their call while I'm having a beer a few blocks away. I tell them I got cold feet. Oh my, I'm so sorry, but I changed my mind and decided I couldn't go through with it. They huff and puff, but after a couple of hours of ignored calls, they go home. I call them Saturday to apologize for being such a coward, and after dwelling on it, I've decided they were right and I will let him move in. And as a token of my remorse, I even bought a mattress and a nice, heavy bed frame as a moving-in gift. I just took a picture of a random expensive mattress and bed frame at the local furniture store. My parents were instantly smitten with the photos. Oh, you guys like cherry wood. And I suggested that maybe Ted didn't deserve such a nice gift, and it'd be better if Ted took their older, worn-out bed frame and mattress, and I send them home with the new stuff. Of course, they took that offer. So on Sunday, they show up again with not only all Ted's stuff, but also a large wooden bed frame with built-in drawers and a high-back board. And guess what? When they show up, I'm not home again. I ignore their calls for a good hour and finally tell them that I decided to change my mind again and hang up. They went ballistic, but ultimately left again. We talked yesterday morning, and I told my dad that I was sorry and I was wrong, and he can move in. My dad freaked out and told me how in the hell he can ever believe that lie again, and I basically told him he can't, so they should stop bringing it up. Edit, not going to bother replying to all the people saying things like, "Why didn't you just say no?" or "This could be solved with a mature conversation." What part of harassing me over a year did y'all not understand? How many times do I gotta say no? 30 times? 40 times? 50 times? No doesn't work, and trying the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result, is just insanity. Next story. My GF and I went to a church BBQ to flex on my ex. Backstory. My 42M ex-wife 44F and I were married for almost 20 years. Over that time, she had 4 affairs of varying degrees, including a sexual relationship with a very close friend of mine from our church. I tried to make it work, and after the last emotional affair, I couldn't do it anymore. I filed for divorce just over 2 years ago. We are still going through the divorce, and she's been high conflict the whole time. She's painted herself as a victim, and I go a new church, but still have some friends at my old one I attended there for over 30 years. My petty revenge. My girlfriend and I have been dating since January. She's aware of my situation, and we are having fun. I have older kids, and she has younger kids. For Labor Day, we both had the day off and wanted to do something fun. I mentioned that my old church does a picnic every year at a park. There are games and activities for the kids and a big potluck BBQ. I told her my ex would be there, but it's a big event and we could keep to ourselves. I'd also be able to introduce my GF to friends from my old church. My GF made sure she was extra cute. We had matching socks, and I wore a shirt that said, "Built for Conflict" on the back. We got to the BBQ. My GF made a dessert to share, and I was grilling. My ex saw us and looked beside herself. She eventually came over and tapped my GF on the shoulder and said, "I'm X's name. I'm my name's wife." My GF said, "Nice to meet you," and held out her hand to shake my ex's. My ex then said, "It's awkward for you to be here, and I hope you feel that way." My GF responded, "Okay," and my ex walked off. Later, my ex approached me and said, "This isn't your church anymore. I think you should leave." I said, "Not gonna happen," and kept walking. She went back to her friends, my old friends, and was just distraught. She eventually asked the pastor to ask me to leave. He's my best friend and was the best man at my wedding. He came and talked to me so he could tell her he did. I told him she needed to grow up and I wasn't leaving. He went back to my ex, and she was unhinged, trying to say we had to leave. She tried to make it some spiritual thing. Eventually, she gave up and went to the friend she had an affair with and his wife to be comforted. They are still friends. I didn't get it. My GF and I just watched and laughed. My ex has been terrible this whole time, and whatever control or narrative she had was destroyed. Everyone watched as she just acted like a witch, and we smiled and waved. In the end, the kids had fun, we got to catch up with old friends, and my ex-wife got put in her place. It was a good day. Side note. My GF is stunning, and several people just stopped with a dumbfounded look on their face when they saw her. Was such a flex to people who want to see me fail. Next story. Refuse to stop at a security check. I run security on an industrial site, which means I do occasional night shifts. The site stays open until 11 p.m. It has a number of businesses that work late, including a storage facility. Due to a recent demolition of one of the units, the storage facility opening hours have been restricted. One of my jobs is to stop anyone who wishes to come in between the hours of 8 p.m. and 11 p.m. to check they have access codes. It's a 30-second check. Everyone is happy to comply apart from this one butthole who instantly took it as a personal attack. I stopped him at the security barrier with a pleasant greeting. "Good evening, sir. Are you trying to access the site?" "What's it got to do with you?" he replied. I explained if you wish to come in, I'd need to know why for security purposes. "I'm not telling you nothing. Who are you? What's it got to do with you anyway?" Calmly, I explained that anyone accessing the site after the hours of 8 p.m. and before 11 would need a valid reason or code if they want to come in, otherwise access will be denied. "F off, you ain't even got a badge. I'm not telling you where I'm going," shouted. "No problem, buddy," I said. "In that case, you can't come in." As I turned my back, he drove up on the curb around the barrier and sped into the storage unit. Normally, I'd lose my crap and throw him out physically, but on this occasion, I took the revenge option. As it was close 11 p.m. and locking up time, I decided to manually override the gate lock on the storage facility and lock him in. Returned to the front gates and locked them as well. As we are a police-patrolled sites, I notified them of the situation in case the guy phoned them. It took around 40 minutes for my phone to start ringing. It's the contact number for emergencies. I knew the idiot had realized he was locked in, and I got around 15 calls. I ignored them all. Long story short, he had to wait until 430 am to get out after my shift. It was delightful opening up the gates and waving him out with a super smug grin on my face. To add insult to injury, I informed the site owners, and they have served him with an eviction notice. Act like a CNT. Get treated like a CNT. Next story. Here, you forgot your trash. Hey all, I've been lurking long enough. It's about time I shared my short story. I'm not sure if it's entirely revenge since it wasn't a slight directly against me, but it felt petty as F and I was satisfied with the result. A few years ago, my then husband and I were in Orlando for a little 3 or 4 day Disney World trip. We needed to go to Walmart for a couple things, so we went to the closest one to the park property. My husband went inside and I waited in the car. As I was waiting, I see a couple older mid-40s or 50s. Ladies pull up a couple parking spots away from me. They got out of their car, pulled a basket over to their car, and filled it with trash from their back seat. After they filled the cart with all the trash from their back seat, they pushed the cart just a couple feet away from their car and within a couple more feet of a trash can and leave the cart. I watch in utter disbelief as these two ladies leave this cart full of trash within a few feet of a trash can and just walk into Walmart like that's how they usually operate. I was so upset because honestly I can't stand people who litter. Keep a hold of your trash and throw it away. It's not hard. I almost wanted to go find the ladies and tell them they left their basket of trash next to their vehicle, but I'm not a confrontational person. I just wanted these ladies to have consequences. Lucky for me, I noticed they left their windows cracked. It's Florida in the middle of the summer. so it's hot and humid. Of course, they left their windows down. Makes perfect sense, right? I get out of my car, bring the trash basket to the trash car, and proceed to start shoving all the trash back into the back seat of the car through the cracked window. Food was falling out of clamshell to-go boxes, liquids spilling from their containers, cigarette ash dumping from old cartons. I made sure to get all the trash out of the basket before pushing the basket back to a cart corral and getting back in my car to wait for my husband to come back, or to see consequences in action. Unfortunately, my husband got back to the car before I could see what their reaction was to the ghost trashing, but damn, I wanted to. That spilled food was cooking in their back seats while they were inside, and I hope their car smelled like trash for a long time. Don't litter, y'all. It's not hard to throw your trash away where it belongs. A Walmart shopping cart isn't one of them. Next story. Fine, I'll pull over and check. I was driving home one day on a road with many lanes, came to a stop at a red light, and the guy behind me honked the moment the light turned green. I hadn't been distracted at all, and I had pushed the gas at the very moment the light had turned green, so I brushed it off as a mistake and kept going, thinking that if he had a problem and wanted to pass me, there was plenty of space. But at the next stop, this time at a yield sign, turning right onto another road, he was laying on the horn again for no reason again. I was not distracted, and I hadn't introduced any extra delays at all. So that was enough for me. I put it in park, stepped out, and made a big show of checking the back of my vehicle and my tires for some kind of damage or problem. Finding nothing, I walked over to ask what the trouble was. I noticed you honked at me a few times. Is there a problem with my vehicle? I can't see anything. The guy was swearing up and down, telling me he had places to be. So I got back and we moved on, and then I noticed he did a big U-turn on the street because, apparently, he had been driving the wrong direction. So I guess he was more concerned with honking at me than he was with paying attention to where he was going. Next story. I got my middle school bully suspended and he eventually changed schools. I used to be an inventor in middle school. Roughly from ages 8-12 I had this phase. I would combine household shampoos, body washes, etc. to make new super products. These weren't great, but at the time, revolutionary. I would attach things to other things to make super versions of both things. One of these super inventions was a pencil/pen/eraser hybrid. It utilized one of my favorite pencils in the world. It was one of my favorite inventions because it actually worked. I was definitely the weird girl in school. I didn't show off my inventions usually, I mostly kept them at home. Since my pencil/pen/eraser combo thing actually worked, I wanted to use it in class. A boy who sat behind me would pick on me a lot, Charlie. One day, he saw me using the invention. At one point, I got up from my desk for something. When I came back, the pencil part was snapped in half and the elastic holding it all together had come off. The invention was effectively ruined. I was devastated. Charlie was snickering. I knew it was him. Oops, hehehe, was all I got from him. I had put up with him being annoying for a long time, but this was the last straw. Remember how I said he sat behind me? The wheels in my head started turning. See, we went to a Catholic private school. Everyone had to wear uniforms with stupid little ties. The girls' ties were not covered entirely by a collar. I cut the back of my tie one day and after class, went up to my teacher upset because Charlie cut my tie. Little did I know that the uniforms were considered school property. Charlie got a heavy suspension, like at least a week, and when he came back, he never effed with me again. I don't think he even finished his time at our school. I think within a couple of years he went somewhere else. I felt a little bad about that part. I didn't know the severity of his punishment, but he also crushed a piece of me that day, and I stopped inventing stuff after that. Next story. Hey, Mr. DJ, don't put a record on. We want to listen to our babies. This is so tiny, but satisfying. Yesterday afternoon, my youngest kid was playing in the middle school pep band for her first home football game. Having been a band kid myself, raising more than one band kid of my own, I know the etiquette of when the band is supposed to play your team's kickoff. First down, touchdown, timeout basically. This hasn't changed in decades. New in yesterday's game, there was a DJ at the stadium. He was playing over the band, and some frankly inappropriate songs, lots of hip-hop/drinking references, Soulja Boy's The Best, etc. Like, I'm not prudish, but seriously, this is not a college crowd. I've DJ'd too, in settings from a middle school dance for the local religious school to a college football stadium to clubs obviously adult crowds. You need to know the audience. The visiting team didn't bring their band, so there were plenty of opportunities for the disc jockey to play music to fill gaps. The bleachers where I was seated, almost exclusively band moms and dads. We were all more than a little peeved that we couldn't hear our kids because dude kept hitting play. Finally, just before halftime, I got a case of F this literal noise. I promised that I wasn't a Karen, but I went to the DJ booth and just asked, "Hey, could you just not play over the band?" I got some attitude about how the athletic director had hired him and take it up with his boss. Okay. Except that I took it a step above his boss. The ad's boss, the principal, and his boss, the superintendent of the county schools, were right there. I've known both forever. Hey Ted, hey John, how are y'all? How's your mama? Incidentally, could we discuss the DJ playing over the band and the questionable choice of music? I asked the DJ to merely be considerate of the kids and their work, but if you invite me to take it upstairs, I'm going to take it all the way upstairs. The next home game, according to John and Ted, will not include that guy. I will happily volunteer to bring my own equipment and play hype music for the next game, if that's needed. I know it's utter cliche, but seriously, just cue up, turn down for what, and we will rock you, and all I do is win. Maybe get folks doing the wobble on the sidelines. And don't play over the band. Next story. No smoking allowed. I owned a duplex and rented out the upper unit. My upstairs tenant had his male cousin staying with him. The cousin was a smoker, and I had previously made my tenant aware that smoking was not allowed because I had non-smoker home insurance. I could smell the smoke every time the cousin lit up, but my tenant denied that anyone was smoking. I had an extra, new in the box, unused smoke detector. Every time I smelled smoke, I would hit the test button on the smoke detector to set it off. After I had done this a few times on a number of days, I found the cousin sitting outside on the front porch smoking. Next story. Inconsiderate neighbor got his comeuppance. Back in 1993, I was living in a South American country where AC wasn't something people had or needed due to the great year-round weather. But obviously, this meant you just kept windows open for airflow. It kept the apartment cool and with clean air, but the downside was noise levels. While 7 months pregnant in an unusually hot, breezeless Easter week, we start hearing dogs barking like crazy day and night. It went on for days, and I'd had it so I went floor to floor to find where this was coming from, and when I got to the offending apartment, I found a group of angry neighbors knocking on the door of the apartment, which was one of those heavy-duty security doors with metal bars that slide into the top, bottom, and sides when you lock it. Long story short, days go by and the poor dogs continue to bark incessantly, and no OE ever answers the door. So, I was sick and tired of not sleeping, and I started going up the elevator to his floor and chucking eggs at his door right from the elevator without even needing to come out. After a few more days of this crap, I stepped it up a notch. I took a tube of crazy glue and squirted its contents into the security door's lock. When the guy returned, he had to call the fire department to help him get through to his apartment. As this was a steel door with bars that went into the solid concrete walls, ceiling, and floor around the door's frame, they had to use pickaxes to destroy everything around it to be able to pull out the door because there was no earthly way to get the lock to open. You can only imagine the mess and what it must have cost him to fix the door and surrounding structures. I was at first feeling like I'd gone too far, until I got the full scoop. It turned out he went off on Easter vacay for 10 days and had left 2 large dogs chained up in a tiny bathroom with a bunch of food and water. Then I didn't feel so bad. I hope you guys liked this video. If you did, make sure like, comment, share, and subscribe the channel R posts.